So,
yeah,
we'll talk about Brittney Griner first.
Well, I think so. Unless you want to, I mean,
No.
Yes. Why not? I've muted the game.
Sorry?
I have muted the game. For those of you listening on Facebook, I have the soccer game on in the background, but I will be doing the show with complete attention.
Okay. I always have CNN on mute in the background in case anything breaks.
But you ever glance at it to see if anything is breaking?
Well, it's right in front of me, so,
Okay.
It's easy to glance at, but no, not really.
Yeah. One tends to get focused on doing the show to the exclusion of everything else.
We're almost there. Are we on with our
30 seconds.
Okay. Welcome, Facebook viewers. Thanks for tuning in. You're going to get the fresh news.
All right, here we go.
And we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
USA on this historic day. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrop.
And what is historic is the Respect for Marriage Act passed again in the House and is being signed at the White House while we tape.
Yes, we're taping on Tuesday, so if some of you are seeing it after that, it's old news. Brittney Griner, as you know, has come home from a Russian prison to LGBTQ rejoicing and Republican crabbing.
They're very crabby. Bisexual Senator Kyrsten Sinema is trying to save her political skin by bailing out of the Democratic Party.
It's all very complicated, but in more interesting news, the U.S. House is holding hearings this week on the alarming rise in anti-LGBTQ violence.
And they could include the war on LGBTQ and race books in public libraries and schools. It's intensifying.
Yeah, it's even hitting the front pages of the New York Times. They catch up eventually. Another former Major League Baseball player has come out.
Elon Musk, you may have heard of him. He slandered Anthony Fauci this week and the out-gay former safety chief of Twitter, and then he got booed at the Dave Chappelle show. What a pair.
Yeah, well, that was kind of heartwarming to hear about all those people booing. Andy is going to review Jonathan Groff and Daniel Radcliffe in Stephen Sondheim's Merrily We Roll Along, returning yet again to Broadway.
And Anne is going to review 2 documentaries and a Hallmark film of the season. But we start with Brittney Griner. It was, to wake up, very thrilling to hear that she had been freed from a Russian penal colony. She'd been held since February on a tiny little drug charge for which they gave her like a 9 to 10 year sentence.
Well, that's a lot less than other people have been and are being held, but gruesome nonetheless.
For trace amounts of that in your luggage? I mean, well, whatever. They wanted her, they got her, and they got back this Russian arms dealer. she's home, of course. If you haven't seen the picture, let's put the picture up. There she is with her wife Sherelle and the U.S. Hostage negotiator Roger Kyrsten, who spent 18 hours with her and Griner on the way home, and described her as intelligent, passionate, compassionate, humble, interesting, patriotic person, and said that she engaged with every member of the crew on the flight and asked them about themselves and got their names. And as soon as she got off the plane, she played basketball.
It's interesting that everyone has had to vouch for what a nice person she is, everyone who's been in contact with her in this process as she makes her way home. Okay, is that because she's big? And of course, Sherelle, before being able to finally be reunited with BG, had to endure a White House Oval Office meeting with the president.
And there's Secretary Anthony Blinken in the background, who was, obviously critical to this. And look, Republican right-wing heads exploded over this. A black lesbian with a wife, and they got this merchant of death. Although there's a lot of questions about that case as well. I don't put too fine a point on it. But who are the biggest arms dealers in the world?
Yes, absolutely. Also, he had served 15 years in a U.S. prison.
Well, I don't know the exact number. I think
and was described as a retired arms dealer.
It's not funny when you're on the other end of a bomb. But Trump attacked Griner as America hating, but I don't believe Brittney has ever called for the trashing of the Constitution the way he has.
No, it's depressing how every single experience is now turned into this us against them, scapegoating, inappropriate language hurled at each other. It's just horrible. We've lost every ability to celebrate anything or work together on anything.
Anyway, Brittney is there in San Antonio. She's going to go through some observation, medical treatment, it was again, it's a thrill to have her back.
It is.
And, I don't like the way she's just dismissed as just a basketball player. I mean, she's an icon. She's one of the leading players of all time and a civil rights activist as well. She cares about these things.
And ironically, someone who has played for a Russian team for years and won them several championships and is a celebrity and honored figure in Russia.
And Republicans don't pretend you care about that Paul Whelan because you did nothing about it for 2 years while you had power.
Right.
All right.
Yes. All right. So one thing people did manage to collaborate on and work together was the Respect for Marriage Act, which, as you know, passed both first the House, then the Senate with some amendments, and then back to the House and passed the House. Although I noticed that 8 fewer Republicans voted for it on its second turn around the House.
And then 2 more Republicans voted yes. So it was.
Well, then maybe it's 10. Fewer Republicans voted for it the second time, even though more explicit religious freedom amendments had been added to it. Right. So, maybe they'd gotten blowback in their districts and decided to cover themselves by voting against it this time.
There's a lot of misinformation about this. You've got to concentrate a little bit about what rights you have and what you don't have under this. The only reason this is being done is because Clarence Thomas said he wants to overturn the pro same-sex marriage decisions of the Supreme Court, mainly the Obergefell decision, which said that the states have to recognize marriages in other states. And of course, it led to, same-sex marriage being legalized across the country in the states. And so
as we tape on Tuesday, Biden is about to sign the law this afternoon. I think he's waiting for the end of the soccer game.
Well, we do have a picture of Nancy Pelosi there celebrating with senators and some of the out gay members of Congress, Tammy Baldwin, Sean Patrick Maloney, there's Jerry Nadler, Richie Richie Torres and others. They are celebrating. They passed it 258 to 169. This repeals the Defense of Marriage Act, 1996. Now, remember, 80% of the Congress members, including Chuck Schumer there, voted for the Defense of Marriage Act back then.
And I had the pleasure of going to many of their book signings at Barnes and Noble and screaming at them in person for signing the Defense of Marriage Act and then getting myself dragged out of those stores. But in the end, we have this. And Pelosi also took a moment during the debate on the House floor this second time around to highlight one of the earliest married couples.
Well, that's Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, who were together forever. They were activists with the Daughters of Bilitis in the 1950s. They were the first same-sex couple legally married in California. So, it's great that they were remembered. They're both gone now, of course.
Longtime friends of Pelosi. So nice to see them highlighted. Now, also notable during the debate on the House floor was the extremely right-wing, extremely homophobic representative from Missouri, Vicky Hartzler, who's been after us for years. And she got up and actually wept in the middle of her statement, or claimed to weep. And her nephew, who is an out gay activist, Andrew Hartzler, promptly went on TikTok to express his opinion about his aunt's speech on the House floor.
Today, a United States Congresswoman, my Aunt Vicky, started crying because gay people like me can get married.
I hope and pray that my colleagues will find the courage to join me in opposing this misguided and this dangerous bill. I yield back.
So, despite coming out to my aunt this past February, I guess she's still just as much as a homophobe.
Let's be clear. Obergefell is not in danger, but people and institutions of faith are.
Aunt Vicky, that's not right. Institutions of faith like religious universities are not being silenced. They're being empowered by the US government to discriminate against tens of thousands of LGBTQ students because of religious exemptions, but they still receive federal funding.
The bill's implications: submit to our ideology or be silenced.
It's more like you want the power to force your religious beliefs onto everyone else. And because you don't have that power, you feel like you're being silenced. But you're not. You're just gonna have to learn to coexist with all of us. And I'm sure it's not that hard.
Charming.
Well done, Andrew. And thank you for doing that, which gave us the opportunity to show a few clips of Vicky Hartzler. It's astonishing that people can be in families together and be so mean and cruel to their other family members.
Representative Jim Jordan, horror show, who's going to be the head of the Judiciary Committee that next year if he's not indicted, who for the insurrection. He also covered up sexual abuse of college wrestlers as a coach, college coach. He voted no, and he said the bill takes the country in the wrong direction. Well, the wrong direction. And bigoted Representative Bob Good of Virginia compared same-sex marriages to polygamy, bestiality, and child marriage. It's quite shameless. But we do have to pay tribute, I think, to somebody who's trying to redeem himself, Ken Mailman. Ken Mailman was the head of the Republican Party at one time and managed the Bush campaign, Bush Jr. And in that year with George Bush, promoted constitutional amendments against same-sex marriage across the country to help George win the election. Now he's thrown himself behind getting Republicans behind same-sex marriage. And they did a tremendous amount of work in the red states, running ads, taking out full-page ads, rounding up all these Republicans to say that they would do it, talking to people. I don't know how much direct lobbying we did, but they sure did. We didn't need to do too much with Democrats, but did a terrific job because we weren't sure we were going to win this thing. And
raised a ton of money to run those ads and do those campaigns. And we spent a lot of years yelling at him, not only while he was doing the horrible work of passing those anti-marriage amendments to get George Bush elected, but afterwards, even after he came out and claimed he had seen the light. We said, a pox on you, too little, too late. But he has kept at it and done the work, and here we are. And yes, he does deserve credit for that.
We do hope people can change in that way.
Yes, and we're looking forward this week to as the Democrats have their last few weeks of control of the House. They are holding a hearing. The House Oversight Committee is holding a hearing this week on Wednesday, tomorrow, as we're taping.
10 a.m.
Yeah, and for those of you who are seeing us now or tonight, it is live streaming, and we'll include that link in the show note we sent out. But they're going to hold a hearing on all this anti-LGBTQ extremism and violence. Carolyn Maloney from New York, who lost her seat in a redistricting battle this year, is going out with a bang, running this hearing, and is going to look at all the Republican rhetoric and how evil it's been and how violence producing. And
since so much of the attacks are on drag queens, we have actually encouraged her to have drag queens at the hearing. To give it back to the Republicans. Go ahead.
They booked a Club Q survivor and a Pulse Club survivor and representatives of various LGBTQ organizations. But yes, we encouraged her office to book drag queens to talk about this.
Some updates on the Colorado Springs massacre. First of all, the lawyer for the guy who's been indicted for this, Aldrich, is back to using he pronouns for Aldrich. Lee Aldrich was on the FBI's radar a day before being arrested in 2021, for threatening to bomb family members. We all heard about that he was arrested a year ago, but he was almost arrested before that incident because his grandparents called the police saying he built a bomb in their basement. He was threatening to kill them. He was upset that they were going to Florida that would get in the way of his plans to conduct a mass shooting. Now, this is all the stuff that he's open about, and he doesn't get on caught by a red flag law in that area of Colorado.
Because that county specifically said they were not going to enforce a red flag law. He had made a racist website that was quite explicit and heinous. He said he wanted to be the next mass shooter. And yet, even saying all this stuff out loud and putting it online, he was not stopped. And he had, as you say, bombs he was making and weapons.
Right. Can we go back to the Supreme Court for a second? I listened to the very scary independent legislature theory case. My head was spinning with all what they were talking about, but it looks like it's not going to come out as bad as we thought it might, which is
because it scared even Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah. And Kavanaugh or Gorsuch? One of them is.
No, not Gorsuch. He's all for
it. Kavanaugh.
He's hell bent on it. Yeah. So anyway, but we're not going to know about that until June. But
it's a case that attempts to take any oversight of elections in the states away from state courts and give it exclusively to state legislatures. So no longer would you have a court that could say this is illegal and unfair. It would be up to a very partisan legislature to decide on the fairness of elections. And even the Supreme Court thinks that's going too far and may give us a better decision.
I'm reading more about the Colorado website case, which it looks like we're going to lose. It never ought to have been a case because there was no complainant against this woman who doesn't want to design gay wedding websites. We didn't mention that the lawyer for the designer conceded in the case before the Supreme Court that if an opposite sex couple rejected the biblical view of marriage, she'd be fine with that. I mean, and then Barrett and I believe it was Gorsuch, yes, they both tried to help her walk that back. She made these statements, which undermined her case entirely, because it reduced the case to not religious views or principles or anything, but status. It was gays that she didn't want to do it for. She was okay with sinners in the heterosexual community.
And let's be clear about how outrageous it is that this case is before the Supreme Court in the first place. The Supreme Court specifically does not take cases where there is no case in the first place.
Not anymore.
All that is gone. If you have a hypothetical, something you think might happen to you down the road, feel free to go to the Supreme Court to get their opinion.
And of course, we had no voice in the case. LGBTQ people were completely erased because there was no complainant. And the conservative majority lack any concern about our ability to access services without discrimination protections. Anyway.
So last week, as we were taping, we did not yet have the results of the Georgia Senate runoff. Yeah. And we're, of course, very happy that Senator Warnock was reelected, in case any of you have been hiding under a rock in the last week.
A great ally of LGBTQ rights.
But just when we thought we were safe, along comes Kyrsten Sinema, who says, I'm going to upset the apple cart a little. I can't take away your 51 vote majority, but I can declare myself an independent and just make things complicated for you again.
Well, this is all about the fact that her rating among Democrats in Arizona, who she has betrayed repeatedly, betrayed all of her promises, is in the toilet. She cannot win the Democratic nomination. Now she's sort of daring everybody, run somebody against me and you're going to get Carrie Lake as your next senator, a Republican or any Republican. And she might be right about that if there's a three-way race. So she is being treated very gingerly by her Democratic colleagues, including Senator Schumer. Look, they're happy to support Bernie Sanders, in Vermont, and Angus King in Maine, because they work well with Democrats and
they are the independents elected to the U.S. Senate.
So she wouldn't even say, well, whether she'll support the Democrat for president in 2024. I mean, she's a deplorable person, really. She's only after herself.
It is not as if she is, so far off base with Democratic principles ideologically. It's that she's in bed with all her corporate donors. Right. This is about her fulfilling the needs of her corporate constituents, not her human constituents.
Absolutely. That's all she's about.
Yeah.
And, now Joe Manchin says he has no intention of jumping, but he might, it's just,
I'd love to see Ruben Gallego get nominated by the Democrats and beat Sinema and whoever the Republicans.
That would be great, but it's hard to be. Well, look, it's 2 years away. We'll be looking at polls.
Anything could happen.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
All right.
Also a mess in the state of Florida. We have Republican State Representative Joe Harding.
Yes.
Joe Harding was the author of the Don't Say Gay bill at the behest of the governor, DeSantis. Very self-righteous, very smug. Well, Joe Harding has now been indicted for fraud and stealing COVID relief funds.
He defrauded the Small Business Association by taking COVID funds. He faces 20 years in prison. He has resigned in disgrace. He is pleading not guilty. Florida Republican legislatures are also working behind the scenes right now to undo the assault on Disney, which took away their special status because it would saddle the taxpayers, as we've told you, with a big bill to make up the lost revenue. And Orlando would have to provide these services. So that's in the works.
That Disney currently pays for.
And staying in Florida, the State Board of Education meeting on Wednesday is going to scrutinize 10 local school boards, including Miami-Dade, Broward, Hillsborough, for not complying with the Don't Say Gay Act. They're challenging local policies that the staff will not disclose sexual orientation, gender identity without student permission, using pronouns with gender consistent with gender identity, and allowing access to restrooms and locker rooms consistent with gender identity. The state's also concerned about a racial equity policy in Indian River School District. A racial equity policy. This is wow.
Well, I love the fact that there's so much resistance to this law and that the battle is joined. And congratulations to all the heroes in Florida and across the country who are fighting back, the teachers, the librarians, the students, the parents who don't want these laws in place and understand that they are censoring learning in this country and reducing us to this homogenous ignorance for no reason at all, except the mania of these right-wing lunatics.
And yet, this is what Governor DeSantis ran on. He was elected overwhelmingly, 59% of the vote, and he leads Trump now in the polls in the Republican Party. Now,
yeah, that is the Republican Party, and that is Florida. And I don't think Charlie Crist, who he ran against in Florida, was popular. And I wouldn't have expected DeSantis to be beaten for governor of Florida. I remain convinced at this point, mark this point, that he is not a national candidate and cannot win the presidency.
From your lips to the voters' ears.
Well, I don't think Trump is electable at this point, and I don't think DeSantis is electable.
Okay. Staying in Florida, Clay County. This year, 102 books were removed from the shelves of the school libraries, pulled at the request of one man, a conservative activist named Bruce Friedman, who we imported down there from New York. He has compiled a list of 3,600 titles to be banned, including The Girl from the Sea, which has no sexual content, just two 15-year-old girls who hold hands and share a kiss. But Friedman warns that students are not in school to learn how to be better lesbians. His ultimate goal, of course, his ultimate goal is about the destruction of public education. He's acknowledged he doesn't read any of the books that he's attacked.
Look, this report on this guy is from a blog called Popular Information that is just excellent on a daily basis in uncovering information like this. I highly recommend subscribing to it and really digs down on this kind of work going on around the country. And it is unbelievable that one guy can start this crusade and succeed in intimidating parents and school boards and governments across the country to so damage kids everywhere.
Look, but all these lists are going to be shared with the right-wing groups across the country. They're all going to be invading your school boards, demanding, these things be taken out. And they're continuing with their assault on drag queen story times in the Seattle area, in Renton, Washington, a pub that sponsored a monthly drag queen story time and rainbow bingo events, was hit by gunfire last Thursday, a single shot through the window at noon. The Brewmaster's Tap Room will go on with its shows, and the assailant had removed his or her or their license plates and wore a mask, so it's hard to identify. One group behind the threats, who was making the threats against the place, have actually pulled back now that it's a shooting war.
Oh, nice. As if we couldn't see that coming. And thank you to a restaurant in Richmond, Virginia, which refused to let a right-wing organization called the Family Foundation hold an event at their restaurant. They were going to hold a dinner for donors. And the restaurant said, no, we're not going to let you come here. You are so vicious and so violent, so anti-LGBTQ, so anti-women, that our workers feel unsafe being in this space with you. So we are not taking your reservation.
And the right-wing group compared this to not serving Black people in the 1950s and 60s. I mean, this is a group that advocates for discrimination against us.
Well, they want to make these false equivalents. That's their specialty. They will argue you to death with these false equivalences.
Well, the Stanford Marching Band mocked the anti-LGBTQ policies of Brigham Young University at the football game at halftime that they had, performing a skit entitled Gay Chicken that culminated in two women getting married and using language from Mormon wedding ceremonies. The BYU fans booed. The Stanford Athletic Department apologized for, says this doesn't reflect our values. Well, how about BYU? Do they reflect your values?
Doesn't reflect your values to criticize bigots. The only thing I couldn't figure out is why they called it Gay Chicken.
Well, maybe you had to be there.
No.
Maybe you had to be there.
All right. And in Asheville, North Carolina, a trans woman, Peyton O'Connor, who is a member of the local school board there, has ended up resigning her position because she was under such relentless attack from a guy named Ronald Gates, who's affiliated with the Alliance Defending Freedom. He just would come to every school board meeting and scream at her. And rather than the town dealing with him, she has stepped off the school board.
All right, I'd rather not talk about Elon Musk, but we must. He made an attack on Fauci, said his pronouns are prosecute Fauci, as the world continues to go mad. That got him a shout out from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who complained. She, of course, you saw her this week at the Young Republican Gala in New York, which is always a hidden event. They will never publicize it. And she made those outrageous statements about if we had our guns there, we would have won on January 6th. And so Dave Chappelle had Musk. The bigger story with Musk relative to this show is that the former head of what do they call it? Trust and Safety Council at Twitter was a gay guy who is now he's not there on the job anymore. And
well, they dissolved the Trust and Security Council altogether.
Right, and Musk has been attacking him based on his thesis about that he wrote for a PhD thesis, which had something to do with, look, if younger people are going to use Grindr, it has to be done safely, and Grindr needs to institute some safety things. This basically made Musk call the guy basically a pedophile, and the guy has had to leave his home. Because he's under such national assault by these groups. You just say that word or anything to do with children, and people want to burn your house down. So that's what's happened. It's absolutely despicable, and that, of course, got Musk, not that, but everything Musk has done, which is awful, got him booed when he went up on the stage with the great Dave Chappelle, the anti-trans activist, and the booing didn't stop.
And Elton John has quit Twitter over this. It was very strange that Dave Chappelle would bring Elon Musk on stage. I think he saw it as a free speech issue because he has been so attacked and feels like such a victim. But I was thrilled that the audience, even though there they were at a Dave Chappelle performance, booed Elon Musk. I don't know how they reconcile that, but that's what they did. All right, should we move on to some of the people we've lost this week? Well, first of all, in California, Day Rodas, 27 years old, trans woman, was found murdered by the side of the road. She worked for the Los Angeles LGBTQ Center, and no one has any idea what happened, but the police are treating it as a murder. More details, we'll pass along any details we have when we get them.
Someone who died of natural causes, Don Luce, an ardent opponent of the Vietnam War. The last U.S. ambassador to Vietnam said, this is the reason we lost the war, because of this guy and what he exposed. He died in Niagara Falls at the age of 88, survived by his husband, Mark Bonacci.
Don Luce worked in Vietnam before the U.S. Vietnam War as an aid worker and teacher, and he was so appalled by the Vietnam War that he became an activist around this and started testifying to Congress in the 60s. He toured the US when he came back to educate against the war and help journalists understand what was really going on there. He was a relentless hero of activism against the Vietnam War. And I can't tell you, we go over all these issues now. If you were not alive during the Vietnam War or have any sense of it, it was so enormous and really tore the country apart. And those who worked against it were tremendously heroic in the face of being called traitors on a daily basis by certainly President Johnson and Nixon, and faced horrible attacks and consequences. He then in the 80s went back to Vietnam and started a project there to fight AIDS in Vietnam, and was just a great guy overall.
One of the things that really turned people against the war was he exposed the tiger cages.
Yes.
These were where South Vietnamese military, government really, tortured people that they captured, opponents, their own people who opposed the war. They would go after them. And this really rubbed people the wrong way.
Well, they were these small little cages that they would put people in. You couldn't stand up. They were deprived of food and water, and they were just screaming for help. And Don Luce was the one who first exposed them.
Now, in this century, he shifted his focus to local scale programs in Niagara Falls, taught sociology up there, said in his 30s and 40s, he tried to change national policy. Now I try to concentrate on helping a few people have an easier life.
It's all good. And someone else who made a big impact, Mary Jane Meeker died at 95 in her home in East Hampton, New York. She was a writer of fiction and nonfiction, young adult, kids fiction. But she wrote lesbian pulp fiction in the 1950s. Best known for this book, Spring Fire, written under a pseudonym, Vin Packer there. She was also well known for having had an affair with Patricia Highsmith. And
the talented Mr. Ripley.
Yes, and Carol, and wrote a book about it called Highsmith, A Romance of the 1950s. She had a lot of different pseudonyms, and at one point she was presenting herself as a literary agent, and she would talk about all her clients, all of whom were her under her pseudonyms.
That's true. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Spring Fire was a college sorority romance, which went through 15 printings and sold 1.5 million copies. These books were tremendously popular, but they required an unhappy ending. She had to.
The publishers required that, and the Postal Service required that. They were not going to distribute these materials if they had happy endings for lesbians.
But she sort of laughed that off and thought that was not so important.
She thought it was hilarious.
With some of that.
She said, why did I use all these pseudonyms? Coming out was not a possibility in those days, she said. And to a great extent, she's right. I mean, we've had Anne Bannon on the show. That's not her real name, but she followed her closely in the 50s, writing these lesbian pulp fictions. But they were very popular with men and women.
Oh, yeah. Anne Bannon did the Bebo Brinker Chronicles, which were tremendously popular. But all of these were huge hits and popular before Stonewall.
Right. And, she wrote under the name Mary James, quirky books for younger children, which will now get on the lists of all the books they want to ban, I suppose. But she had that as well.
Now, not dead, but in a lot of trouble is Sam Brinton.
Yes.
Sam Brinton is a non-binary nuclear expert, worked for the Trevor Project for 4 years, and then was hired in this Biden administration to work at the Department of Energy. Well, he got in trouble recently. He was found by security cameras to be stealing luggage at airport carousels. And the pictures are very clear. It's very clear what he did. He got on, they got on airplanes with no luggage, but then wound up in the baggage area taking bags off the carousel. The Department of Energy has fired them, and there's a lot of talk online about should people have known they were a problem. Some claim that they had warnings ahead of time about Sam not being the most stable.
Well, Sam was a very outspoken activist in the anti-conversion therapy movement and talked about the most horrific things, but then would not answer questions about where did this happen? Where was this person? Who was the therapist that did this? And it became very suspicious.
Yeah, so there's some debate about that, but Sam is now being prosecuted and has lost their job at the department.
I hope Sam gets the help they need.
Definitely. Also controversial is the former Kyrsten Beck, who got a lot of publicity a few years ago as a Navy SEAL who had come out as trans, and now has announced that they are detransitioning, as it's called, back to being Chip Beck.
Well, the right wing is playing this up very much. They love you detransitioning. But one of the things that's been said in the discussions that we've had online with fellow activists is, hey, no medical treatment is 100%, and when a person dies after a heart operation, you don't say, "Oh, God, stop doing those operations." So look, this is very rare. Vast majority of people who go through these things are thrilled to be getting into the bodies that they
yes, and that's not to discredit detransition either for those who decide that that's what they need. There was some question about whether Chip Beck transitioned too quickly without the proper process of assessing their situation, and that may be implicated too.
Well, former Major League Baseball player T.J. House has transitioned out of the closet. He was a pitcher with the Cleveland team in Toronto from 2013 to 17, has come out as gay, announcing his engagement to his boyfriend, Ryan Neitzel, Neitzel, in conjunction with the passage of the Respect for Marriage Act. He is the third former player to come out after playing, after Billy Beane and, of course, the great Glenn Burke. Although Burke was pretty out when he was on the team.
Yeah. TJ says that he felt a lot of shame for many years, but now love has set me free. So congratulations, TJ and Ryan.
It will do that. All right.
All right. So
international news?
Yes. And we start with the sad news of Grant Wall. He was an extremely prominent sports writer, straight, but a great ally of the LGBTQ community. His brother is gay. And in honor of his brother, he wore this shirt, this rainbow shirt around a soccer ball in Qatar, covering the World Cup.
And they didn't want to let him in the stadium. They're talking about the guards at the gates. They detained him for a while. Eventually, they let him in, and the head of FIFA or something apologized for it. But he stood up for us, and he paid a price.
While he was there, he started feeling sick. And at first, he thought it was a bad cold. But it got worse and worse. He was 48 years old, and he was in the press box covering a game and suddenly collapsed. They tried to revive him. They failed. They took him to the hospital, but he had died, 48 years old. Some people want to raise questions about his death because he had been so outspoken in support of LGBTQ issues and people, but no one has come up with any real evidence that there was anything done to him. He leaves his wife, Dr. Celine Gounder, who some of you may know because she is a prominent scientist, doctor, and journalist. She appears regularly on CNN. She has done a lot of work on infectious diseases, including TB and HIV, also Ebola and COVID. And it's just heartbreaking for her to lose him, for him to lose his life, for both of them to be such terrific people. And now this tragedy has occurred. And that's not the only news out of Qatar. In covering this, some other stories have been uncovered, such as that an English fan with rainbow clothes was stripped naked by security and examined, like what, he has rainbows up his rear end. I don't quite get that. It's just humiliation. And a trans woman who is a citizen in Qatar, quietly, talked about what really goes on there, and was forced to cut her hair to sort of deny her femaleness and to have breast tissue removed that she had grown on hormones.
Well, they're much kinder in Scotland, where they've upheld the challenge from a group funded by J.K. Rowling to the Gender Recognition Act, which is, which just defines transitioning and what it means to be a woman and what you have to do and all that kind of stuff. They were challenging that.
Yeah, they wanted to disempower trans women from being recognized as women, and the court said no. The act enables their recognition, and we're not going against that, and you are wrong, and you're out of here.
Latvia has dumped its legislative draft on civil unions, but they're avoiding what the Constitutional Court is saying that they've got to do, which is come around to some sort of recognition of it.
But we may have buried the lead from Barbados, which has gotten rid of its sodomy laws.
Well, it's gotten rid of its buggery and gross indecency laws, a vestige of the British Empire.
Yes.
It's the third country in the Caribbean this year to do so, and the repeal goes into effect in January.
It's a tidal wave of legalization in the Caribbean. Well, for years, and we've been doing this show for decades, we have been reporting on these laws being in place in the Caribbean and assuming that someday all that would change. And evidently this is the time, and it's exciting to see that happen.
Yes, we have been doing this for decades, and I'll just remind you, I'm going to be gone for the next 3 weeks. And
oh no, Andy, you're going to be gone for 3 weeks?
Maren Johns is going to be here with Anne,
yes.
Continuing the news. I'll send in some play reviews next week, because I'm seeing a bunch this week. And we really appreciate all the support we've been getting from our viewers. I mean,
really,
Anne writes to you. You've been contributing. You can go to our website at gayusatv.org. And if you'd like to make an end of the year donation, we really appreciate it. It is keeping us going. It's just so encouraging. We don't know many of you, and yet here you are supporting us. And it's great to know that you're out there. So thank you.
We have gotten to know quite a few of you by your cards and letters, and we appreciate that interaction. That's sort of an added bonus to doing the show. And also in the Caribbean, after this little, advertisement for us in the middle, Aruba and Curacao now have a new court order ordering them to legalize same-sex marriage. Sometimes they resist, but it's very looking good.
And moving to the Pacific, in the Kingdom of Hawaii, which is what it used to be, apparently the last princess, Abigail Kinoikai, I'm not going to go with the rest of the name, has died at the age of 96 with her wife by her side in the palace. She was quite a character and a bit of a philanthropist because she was loaded. The Hawaiian throne was overthrown by American businessmen back in 1893.
Well, she at one point said she would donate $100,000 to the Vatican, to the Catholic Church, but only if the Pope showed up to take a picture accepting the check.
Hey, and it was nice to see the plot against Germany overthrown, and that was inspired by QAnon, which is a hugely anti-gay group operating all over the world now, apparently. And so they busted it up.
Yeah, I mean, I have felt very concerned since the beginning of the year about all this violence, all these fascists taking power, but there seems to be some pushback lately, and that feels good.
Okay.
Entertainment news.
Oh, I haven't seen The Whale by out playwright Samuel Hunter. I did see the play. Brendan Fraser, as a morbidly obese gay man, is getting Oscar buzz. The critics are very split. Dana Stevens at Slate suggests a new Oscar category: Best Performance in a Terrible Movie, directed by Darren Aronofsky, who did Black Swan.
It is very controversial. There are people who do not like this portrayal at all, but I haven't seen any version of it, so what do I know? What I did see was a clip from the People's Choice Awards where Lizzo, who won, let's see, People's Champion,
And for Song of the Year, About Damn Time. That's the name of the song.
So she brings 17 trans activists onto the stage.
Well, wait a minute. She brought 17 activists. 2 were for transgender equality.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected.
Okay.
But she named every single one of them and talked about the great work they're doing. It's a wonderful piece of video, which we are going to link to in our weekly show notes. So if you're not on our list, go to gayusatv.org and sign up for our once a week email, we promise, unless, the world.
Breaking news. GoDaddy will send you a note if you sign up and say you really want to be on this list, and you have to say yes, and then you're on the list. By the way, Lizzo has supported the trans community throughout her career.
And this clip is very heartwarming. It was great to see.
Well, Daniel Craig is going to grab another gay role again in the film Queer, based on a William Burroughs novel from the early 1950s about a character based on himself living in Mexico City, an addict living among young, broke American expats, directed by the director of Call Me By Your Name, who next year has a pro tennis movie coming out, Challengers, starring West Side Story's Mike Faced and The Crown's Josh O'Connor, with a same-sex love story.
A little sooner than all that, the Golden Globes in January will be hosted by Gerard Carmichael, who you remember from his fantastic special, Rothaniel, where he came out, and this is him hosting Saturday Night Live earlier this year. Rothaniel was stunning. Now, the Golden Globes have been almost dissolved in charges of racism and corruption. It's been basically 30 foreign press types, self-appointed, who hand out these awards every year.
Well, Brendan Fraser was nominated, but he said he won't go, and he didn't want the nomination because he was sexually harassed by the head of the Foreign Press Association.
Yeah, and he said he did nothing about it. He did nothing about it. Tom Cruise returned his Golden Globes when the scandal broke. So now they have vastly increased their membership. They've diversified it. They've hired a Black gay man to host the awards. But people are debating in Hollywood whether or not to go. So some of the nominees include, wait a second, let me get this.
Cate Blanchett for Tar in a lesbian role.
Yeah, she's going to get an Oscar nomination too. It's still a terrible movie with a terrible performance.
And they nominated Emma Thompson for Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which I liked very much. But in the comedy musical category, it is neither.
Really?
It's a drama.
Well, they nominated White Lotus and the spectacular Jennifer Coolidge. Have you been watching it?
I watched that nutty last episode.
Well, it was a mess, is what I think. But it was all about the bad gays and the end of Jennifer Coolidge. I kind of liked the show, but I thought the last episode was really just trying
jump the shark.
Yes, exactly. All right, and then merrily we roll along.
Well, yes. Give me a second to talk about this show because I'm so excited about it. It's at the New York Theater Workshop. It's sold out, but I think it's going to make it to Broadway. This is Stephen Sondheim's famous flop from Broadway in 1981, which was very misconceived and miscast with young people playing people who go from older to younger in the course of the show. So there's this woman named Maria Friedman, who's sort of a Sondheim savior, and she did this in London. I saw it there. This is even better, with a real dream cast. You've got, put the picture up again. You've got Jonathan Groff there in the middle as Franklin Shepard, melting down amidst his Hollywood success, surrounded by hangers-on and marital strife, and chastised by his old friend, novelist Mary Flynn, Lindsay Mendez there. Going back in time, we see Franklin's more grounded theater writing partner, Charlie Kringus, Daniel Radcliffe, you might know him, in a spectacular meltdown breakup on live TV. And he does a terrific job with a dizzying patter song. And the scenes keep going back further and further in time till when they met on the roof in 1958, looking for Sputnik in the sky, full of hope and possibility. And all of this is accompanied by some of Sondheim's most heartfelt songs. Old Friends, Not a Day Goes By, Our Time. These are standards now. And it sort of feeds a desire to roll back the clock from our crabbed time. And I left the theater walking the streets of the East Village, where I was first living in New York City in the 70s, remembering old friends and both departed and abiding, and filled with hope again that this can be our time, if we only remember who we were.
Well, a lot of what we've talked about today are people who were doing great things 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And we would like to go back to some of those times, but let's do great things in this time. All right, something else to look forward to. In June, we will see the publication of Elliot Page's memoir called Page Boy. Elliot has come a long way in transitioning and achieving self-esteem, and you can read the whole thing there. You can pre-order it now, but it's not coming out till June. And then what's next? I happened upon the Hallmark they're claiming it's the first gay leads in a Christmas movie. They've done lots of movies with LGBTQ characters, even some with couples that are fairly prominent in the movie, but this is the first full-blown gay couple leads. The Holiday Sitter. One gay guy on the left, Jonathan Bennett, has to babysit his niece and nephew, and of course the next door neighbor is another gay guy, and they meet cute, and surprise, I don't think I'm spoiling anything here to say they end up together. Oh. It's cute. It carries you along if you're in the mood for that kind of thing. It's decently done, although Jonathan Bennett plays a little over the top for the beginning of it, but it's okay. And then on a much more serious note, there is a movie opening in New York on Friday, and then around the country, a documentary called Nellie and Nadine. It's been an award winner on the film festival circuit, and it's about these two women. This is a true story of these two women who met in the Ravensbrück concentration camp in World War II and became a couple. They were together for a while, then they separated, and then they came back together, and they died eventually. They had met originally in 1944. Their granddaughter, the granddaughter of one of them, found after their death a box with photos, letters, and Super 8 films. And out of that has constructed this 90-minute documentary that I have to admit I haven't seen. I've seen the trailer. I've read all about it. But Nellie and Nadine is just a tremendously compelling story idea.
Tell us about Boy Scouts Honor.
Boy Scouts Honor I did see that. This, again, is a documentary, and it's available on demand on streaming services. It's a story of survivors of abuse at a Foxborough, Mass. Boy Scout camp, hundreds of them over the years. And it is the most honest and direct and straightforward telling of this story that I have ever seen. I found it absolutely fascinating and mesmerizing, and I would urge you to look for that, Boy Scouts Honor.
And on Netflix, the Spanish gay series Smiley.
8 episodes, very popular in Spain, set in Barcelona, a queer friend group, a dramedy, even female couples, and very explicit, and dramedy popular in Spain.
And I'll send you a link to a story about how the three of the top cast members of Death of a Salesman are out LGBTQ.
See you in 3 weeks, Andy. Goodbye,
Happy
everybody.
New Year.